Hello everyone and welcome back to part 2. So just a reminder of who we are joined by. We've got Rachel from Skipton, Andy from Nationwide, Robin from Virgin Money and Clive from Leeds. So we're now going to focus more on affordable housing and new build. So I'm going to start, Clive, with you, if that's okay. Where do you see the new build market as we move into 2023? And do you think we're going to see any positives within the new build space over the second-hand market?
Well, as we know, Help to Buy is drawn to a close now, so the challenges are what is going to come around to replace that. Now, a lot of people are saying shared ownership is a possibility, but I think on its own it won't fill that gap. I mean, just to give you a few stats, it's estimated around about 202,000 properties in this country are currently on a shared ownership basis, and we're adding around about 17,000 new ones a year onto that. Clearly that isn't going to replace Help to Buy, which was much bigger than that, so we need more schemes to come on board, of which there are several being passed around at the moment, and some lenders are supporting and some are considering. The builders still obviously have an appetite to build. They're all well capitalised and have been constantly buying up land for the last sort of 7 years, so I don't think we're going to see a slowdown in building. The government have been mentioning a target of 300,000 units a year. I still think that is probably some way off, and will probably be similar figures that we have been for the last few years, which is closer to 200,000 than we are 300,000. Demand for new build properties in comparison to second hand is high, I think mainly because they are very EPC rated lowly, and I think there's more supply than there is in the second hand market. So I think it'll be much the same as we've seen, John, for the last few years.
Okay. Rachel, I'll come to you if that's okay.
Yeah, I think when you look at new build as an industry, I'm more optimistic. I think we absolutely should get to 300,000 a year. However, we still haven't got enough housing stock, have we? We still, and for so many different reasons, new build continues to be a really attractive market. You look at the kind of purchasers that are buying a newly built property, but you also add into that the green agenda, and that especially against the backdrop of cost of living, people are seeking out more energy efficient homes. I think there's a real opportunity there for some really good advice and really good education to help people in that buying process. We are looking into some change with obviously Help to Buy going. We're seeing some real innovation across the market as to what will replace that, and I think part of the challenge, that's absolutely welcome innovation, we've almost seen a bit too much of that, and that now we're facing into a market with lots of different options, and while that's fantastic for consumer choice, what that does is create a bit of confusion, and actually as lenders we're struggling, not to speak on behalf of everyone, but we're struggling to pick which will be the front runner, and which horse do we back in that way, and what will the consumers understand, what will brokers understand, but also we just want to make sure that we're not going into a market where brokers are going from already looking at loads of different lenders to now looking at kind of 10, 15 different schemes as well. So I think there's lots of options. I think the next 6 months are really pivotal for new build, and will kind of pave the way for where we go from here.
Okay, Robin, I'll come to you next. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think also on the sustainability side, you've got the Future Home Standard coming in 2025, which is going to mean that the new build properties that are being built are more sustainable for the future. So if you think about the challenge you've got in the second-hand market and retrofitting and getting to the government's net zero by 2050 target, that's going to be making new build more attractive to people to go into an energy efficient home, a sustainable home, but also one that hopefully is doesn't require future retrofitting and future upheaval, and because of the Future Home Standard and what that helps those properties to be more the sustainability to have more longevity, basically.
Okay.
So
Andy, you think that?
I just think I like to see some shift in dynamics. So I agree with everything that everyone has said. But I think we've had a period now where demand has far outstripped supply in the new build sector. I think we can expect that demand will soften in the purchase market. Given the environment that we're in at the moment. The costs of mortgages pushing up, cost of living challenges that exist as part of that. But I still think there's going to be sufficient demand. But I do think we'll see different dynamics, by way of, the forward sold position may come in ever so slightly because of that as well. But I think the industry has done a good job of weaning itself off Help to Buy. If you look at the overall numbers in terms of Help to Buy and where they've got to as of late, actually it's a relatively small proportion of the new build market now. I agree with Clive, shared ownership is definitely going to be a scheme that will fill some of that void, but it's not going to fill all of it. We've obviously got schemes out there such as Deposit Unlock that will support products for a smaller deposit, with customers with smaller deposits, and then we've got government initiatives such as First Homes as well, which is expected to grow as well. So all of them will serve a purpose. I think the supply will still be strong, and I think the prospects for the new build market are pretty good actually for the next year.
Okay, thank you, and leads nicely into my next topic, which is Help to Buy. So we all know that it ended on the 31st of last month after 9 years. Stats, 360,000 homes, or in excess of 360,000 homes we used Help to Buy to purchase property. So huge numbers. So where do we think buyers are going to turn? And Andy, I know you sort of just touched on this a little bit. And do we think then that it's going to be the shared ownership model? Is it going to be others? What do we think as a panel? Clive?
Well, yeah, shared ownership is dependent on government funding to a large degree. I think the current, the previous regime to the current one had pledged 11.5 billion to affordable housing over the next 5 years, and that should allow us to build around about 180,000 units over the next 5 years. Now, not all of those will go to purchase. Some will go to rent. And I suppose the unknown is how many will go to rent, and that will depend on affordability over the coming years. I think because of Help to Buy going, a lot of developers will be using their Section 106 requirements of shared ownership to fulfil their requirements for planning, because as we know, a percentage of units on a site have to be for affordable housing. If they're not using shared ownership, they'll be looking to use other schemes such as First Homes, which is out of its pilot scheme now. There are now 53 sites available for First Homes around the country, and we're starting to see more and more units come through for that. So there are alternatives, but we still need probably more, John.
Yeah, okay. Rachel, I know you've done stuff on this in the past and talked about different schemes and things. What are your thoughts?
I think we need to strip back to what are we trying to achieve here, and you look at Help to Buy, especially kind of towards the last 2 years of that, and it's supporting first-time buyers. And as a country, we've got a real responsibility as we move forward from Help to Buy to look at how we support first-time buyers. 56% of all first-time buyers last year were supported by the bank of mum and dad. That's a stat that makes me feel really uncomfortable, and I think as an industry we really need to innovate as lenders, as challengers. You've got new people coming to market, you've got Own New, Nested even, On Ladder, to name a few of many different MIGs coming to the market, but different variations, private variations of shared ownership. Probably been approached by 10, 15 people in the last couple of months, as I'm sure we all have. I think we need to give time to innovators and support that, because actually when we then come to needing it in different markets, it won't be there if we don't get behind it and support it. But that being said, it's really important that it's the right thing for the customer. So we need to remember why we're doing this. We're doing this to support first-time buyers. And there is a definite need to not rely on intergenerational wealth as we move forward from this, because otherwise we're just going to move further into this market where we're growing the divide between the have and have-nots, and I definitely don't want to contribute to that in any way. I think we've really got to look at how we can move forward from that. So some fantastic opportunity here for fantastic advice from brokers, but also for lenders to think differently, and I really hope that as we come into next year we see that.
Okay. Robin?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a degree of unknown as well post Help to Buy in there in terms of what kind of gap and void there is going to be, and that does need to fill. As Andy mentioned earlier, the developers have started to rein back a bit on that already, so the dependence isn't quite what it used to be. I think there's also potentially a bit of an adjustment in terms of the market for new build post Help to Buy, because it was a fantastically successful scheme, but actually it helped buyers potentially move from a 1-bedroom flat to a 4-bedroom house and miss 2 or 3 natural steps on the housing ladder, and some first-time buyers move into bigger houses than they normally would. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think post Help to Buy, some of that might adjust back. Buyers will still be able to buy properties. There's plenty of, with the new schemes and also lenders offering 95% LTV and plenty of 90% LTV out there. And maybe developers will look at their mix of properties that they're building and their strategy in terms of the types of houses they're building for the types of buyers that are in their market. And maybe that will shift and change a bit. But a lot of it is still unknown. But still huge opportunity for us all to support that market. But there's a bit of wait and see, I think, as well.
I think it's a great point on them moving from that 1-bed to a 4-bed. Do we think we're going to start to see a shift back to we're going to go from our 1-bed to our 2-bed and then to our 4-bed? Or do you think, we're in a market now where nobody's going to want to do that?
I've got quite a polarising view on this. I think that, because you hear that when you look at the data, I spent a lot of time looking at Help to Buy data because I'm really boring and I love the spreadsheet. And actually, the data just doesn't support. There are the odd people who have bought a bigger house, and I bought my first home on Help to Buy, so I'm happy to share. I did definitely buy a bigger house than I would have been able to without it. Did that mean I didn't have to move again and didn't have to pay stamp duty a second time? Was that, if you look at a 5-year trajectory, actually a much better thing for me and a lot of my friends who bought on the same street in exactly the same way? So I think we need to be really mindful when we talk about Help to Buy, and you hear it banded around a bit, don't you? You're going to help to buy bigger, or help to kind of move again, kind of before it was restricted to first-time buyers. And I think there is a bit of that, but I don't perceive that to be a negative thing. I think it's done a lot of really positive things to help people to buy a forever home, or to help people to settle and really build roots for their family without having to keep moving. And I think when we look at home ownership now, people are staying in homes for a lot longer. That's something we're seeing culturally across transaction data. If you go back sort of to parents' generations and before that, people were moving every couple of years. It's just not financially viable to do that. So I think when we give the lens of Help to Buy and helping to buy bigger, I'd just like to give that other angle on it as well. I'll get off my soapbox now, John.
No, all good, all good. So I want to move away from Help to Buy now and look at the shared ownership piece. And I know it's sort of a topic that no one really wants to talk about right now, which is the 10% share, 1% staircasing. It's there, it's out there in the market, it's an option for people. Where are we sitting as lenders? As much information as you could potentially give us. Clive, you're looking at me, so I'm going to come to you first.
You're right, John, and I think we're starting to see the new leases come through now, where 10% shares are allowed. As yet, I don't think there are many lenders, I don't think there are any actually supporting that. And I think it's sort of a wait and see scenario on that. I think that we're conscious of the fact that there might be demand for it, but we need to be responsible in our lending, and we need to make sure that it's the right thing to do. We are looking at doing that and sort of contemplating entering that market, but we haven't made a conscious decision to do that yet. I think what we are seeing in the shared ownership market, though, is still an incredible level of demand, and obviously with Help to Buy going, perhaps there's a bit of a trickle-down effect in that we're not seeing, for instance, more people failing their applications on shared ownership, which you might have thought, bearing in mind current affordability, but maybe people are sort of trickling down that probably would have gone for at the 4-bed detached house now, and now buying shared ownership. So the market is still really strong. That's what we need to be conscious of is rising costs and increasing service charges and things like that, which are going to impact on customers. So it's not just a case of buying a smaller share so it's become affordable. You've still got to think about the rental fees, service charges, things like that. So it's a lot to take into account.
Cool. Andy, anything?
Yeah, I mean, we agree with what Clive says there. I guess what we've not yet seen is how much consumer demand there is going to be for these smaller shares and options for staircasing. And that is key to any lender as well from a prioritisation point of view. When you look at your propositions and when you look at what it takes to fulfil a smaller upfront share and smaller staircasing options, because it requires system change, which requires investments, which requires something else to be deprioritised as a consequence of it. So I think it's definitely one that we're keeping a close eye on to understand whether there is demand for that, so we'll always keep it under review. But similar to what Clive has said there, there's nothing quite in the offing at the moment, but it's something that we're reviewing.
Anyone want to add anything?
No, I think watching brief on that one, and the challenging thing for this, and I imagine as brokers watching or listening in, is that we're all saying we'll see what demand is, and equally until one of us does it, we can't see what demand is. It's a bit chicken and egg. But I think I absolutely echo that it's got to be what's right for the customer, and there does become a tipping point, and that's what's challenging, is that we're all making decisions wholesale at a kind of that affect lots of people, but actually these are all really individual circumstances, and is smaller staircasing or a smaller share of the property the right thing for a customer? Only the advisor in that environment knows that. So I think it's something we'd absolutely like to look at and considering, but it's not like say systems requirements. There's lots of different things that come into it, and actually in this market the change agenda is huge, right? There's so much that lenders are needing to adapt to. Is it top of the change agenda? Probably not for many of us at the moment.
Okay, all right, thank you. I want to move into supporting brokers. So we've talked a lot today about the challenging market, and it's challenging for brokers as well. So how do you think as lenders you can do more, if possible, to support the brokers in this challenging market? Robin?
Yeah, I think it boils down to communication. Effective communication is fundamental. We've talked already about the difficulties of withdrawing rates at short notice. As Rachel said, we'd all love to be giving much more notice, 24 hours. All lenders would like to give as much notice as possible. We don't want to put brokers in a situation where them and their customers are stressed. But communicating when we have to do that in an efficient way and an effective way is fundamentally key. Certainly from a Virgin Money perspective, we've been looking at all of our processes in operations and resourcing throughout this period, not only so we can get our service in a good position now, but also so that we can react better to future changes, and we know we're still currently in that kind of quick change environment. And then for me it's education really. We need to help brokers understand what we need as lenders, because it is different, it's not all the same, so that when they get applications in, it's packaged properly, and that takes a lot of the stress away from operations and the problems that you see when you're having to put applications in at very short notice. So a number of things, but all of that boils down to just communication. Use your BDMs; they're the font of all knowledge, and they'll help you get it right first time.
Cool. Rachel?
Took the words out of my mouth there in terms of using the BDMs. I think clear communication and speaking, and lenders have a responsibility to try and be as transparent as possible, and we absolutely do get that insight on what's going on with swaps or what do we think might happen here, and we, all of our teams, especially all of the BDMs at Skipton, are all really fed that knowledge really quickly. We every call to about what's going on in the market, so that they can cascade that out and speak to brokers and have really informed conversations. So I think we absolutely can do as much as we can to support the market, give information, share what we're seeing, even if that's just a view that you disagree with. At least you've heard a view and can discuss that further. But equally, call to action here is to absolutely utilise the resources available. So many lenders now have a portal just full of info, podcasts, webinars. You'll have your own support as well internally. Lean on those people around you. No person is an island. And actually, when we go through real turbulent times of change in our market, leaning on other brokers around you, leaning on that community, really does come into its own. And we saw that. We've seen that over the last couple of years, haven't we? So I just echo Robin's points really.
Clive?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, and I think there are other things out there that brokers can use. Things like online sourcing systems for knowledge, etc., and criteria, which I think we have teams that are constantly updating those, so they're probably updated before our own website.
Okay.
So but I think they are useful tools, and it can be frustrating if lenders move without sort of acknowledging this to brokers. But as everyone said, BDMs are there, and they should be utilised fully.
Okay. Expect lots of calls to your BDMs then following this. Andy?
So I think we've always got a very keen eye on all aspects of our broker proposition, from our policies and ensuring that they're relevant in the current climate to the products, to making sure that our service is as strong as it can be, and our systems are supporting brokers trade in the way that they want to trade. I guess the key thing for me, and it's a similar theme to what everyone else has said, is utilising the BDMs. I think we're in a great position now where, let's face it, certainly on our part, I can't speak for all of the lenders, for the past couple of years, our BDMs have had to become quite reactive. The buoyant market, the volumes that we've seen have meant that a lot of their role is focused on post-submission, supporting with the applications through the process, and that's still going to be a key component of it. But I know all of our BDMs are raring to get out there again and actually talk about the propositions and the USPs and the aspects of what we can support with, which might be a bit nuanced or different. So I'd certainly encourage brokers to utilise their BDMs, and I know that's something that we're committed to supporting with.
Okay. So the final question from me, which I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear, around the specialism, and we've touched on it already in terms of specialism of new build, shared ownership. Obviously I sit here looking after Just Mortgage's new build division. How important do you think it's going to be moving into a tougher market that people, developers, HAs, customers work with those that are specialists and fully understand the products, the nuances and the new build and affordable housing market? I'll come to you, Robin, first. Okay.
Yeah, definitely very important. I think if you bring it back to the customer's perspective, they want to be dealing with a broker who understands all aspects of the nuances of the market. And there's no question that new build is becoming a more and more specialist segment of the wider market. Whether it's the new third-party schemes that we've talked about coming in, whether it's shared ownership, the first home scheme, or just the general nuances that new build is different. You have to deal with developers. There's additional pressure, there's additional forms, different timescales, different processing procedures. So all of that means you need a more in-depth knowledge of the market that you're dealing with, and developers and HAs will get the comfort that firms have that deep understanding, and ultimately that means the customer is getting a far better service from the advisor that they're dealing with. So yeah, 100% agree that's really important.
Cool. Clive?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the advantage of having a specialist broker is that it's not just he has a specialist solicitor, he's a specialist estate agent, and it makes the process just that much more smooth. When we do get issues as lenders, it tends to be when brokers are not familiar with a certain segment of the market, they perhaps do one case a year, say shared ownership, and that's when things can go wrong because they don't understand the nuances of it. So certainly in the new build sector, specialism works well.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, complexity again is key, and that level of specialism is definitely required, more so than many sectors across our industry. Given the nuanced nature of it, the different types of schemes the brokers are having to deal with. So I think it's going to be as crucial moving forward as it has been, over recent years. So it's definitely going to be continue to be very important, John.
Cool.
And well, all of us specialise in new build, and I don't imagine, I speak perhaps for all of us, but definitely for my case, no one ever phones us up or phones me up and says, I had a really good case, Rach, it's absolutely flown through, it's been brilliant. We only ever really get those calls when it starts to go a bit bumpy, and generally whenever we see that, it all links back to what Robin touched on, which is that communication and those really clear lines of communication. And when you work with a broker that specialises in new build, they do work really closely and collaborate with their developer. They work really closely with the legal team, the conveyancing, everything that sits behind that. And I think that you can't really put a price on how important that open communication is, and knowing a person, knowing that stakeholder, and being able to resolve a problem really quickly. So when you look at, if I was purchasing in the market now as someone with industry experience, I'd absolutely go to a new build specialist broker, because I absolutely think when it's a bit like a good conveyancer, isn't it? You don't really see the value in that until something goes wrong, and then it really does pay off. So for me, it's absolutely fundamental that, and our market, we all agree, is getting ever more complex, especially when we look at things like schemes and what's coming down the line. So yeah, for me, in a word, it's very important.
Cool, brilliant. Well, I think that ends it perfectly. So thank you everyone for joining me today. I hope everyone that's watched this has found it interesting, some points to take away. Watch out, because hopefully I'll be doing another session with some other fantastic people. Thanks for watching.